In the depths of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a universal truth that even the most advanced species struggle to accept. Never judge a warrior by the softness of their world. The Galactic Council had files on every species in known space, their military capabilities, their technological prowess, their breaking points. But there was one species whose file remained frustratingly thin, marked only with a single notation: proceed with extreme caution. They called themselves humans. When Captain Marcus Chun stepped onto the alien flagship with nothing but standard issue gear and a calm smile, the assembled alien commanders saw exactly what they expected to see: another soft creature from a backwater planet, playing at being a soldier. They had no idea they were about to witness why Earth's children carried the stars in their eyes and steel in their hearts. Some mistakes can cost you a battle. Others can cost you everything you thought you knew about the universe. This is the story of one such mistake. The massive Korth AI battleship Infinite Dominion hung in space like a metallic mountain, its hull scarred by 1,000 battles across the galaxy. Inside its command chamber, General Thraxar studied the tactical display with all four of his eyes, each one reflecting a different aspect of his growing frustration. The blue-green planet below them seemed so peaceful, so defenseless, yet it had become the source of the Coalition's greatest headache in 3 centuries. Earth. The humans had appeared on the galactic stage only 50 years ago, emerging from their single star system with primitive fusion drives and laughably basic weapons. Every projection had suggested they would be absorbed into the greater galaxy within a decade, becoming another client species under the protection of more advanced civilizations. Instead, they had somehow carved out a respectable territory, established trade routes, and, worst of all, began influencing the political balance of the Outer Rim territories. General, his aide, Commander Vextai, approached with visible nervousness. The Korth AI were a proud warrior race, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor-like skin and razor-sharp claws. They had conquered 17 star systems and subjugated 12 different species. Yet this single human world had managed to resist their diplomatic pressures for months. The human representative has arrived. Thraxar turned all 4 eyes toward the massive view screen. A small human shuttle, barely the size of a Korth AI personal transport, docked with their flagship. He had expected a delegation, perhaps a team of their best negotiators backed by military advisors. Instead, according to his intelligence reports, they were sending a single individual. One human, Thraxar rumbled, his voice carrying the depth of controlled violence that made other species step back. They send one soft-skin to negotiate with the entire Korth AI 4th Fleet. The chamber's other occupants, representatives from 6 different coalition species, murmured among themselves. The insectoids FTI clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter. The crystalline Veltar chimed with amusement. Even the usually stoic Margan delegates allowed themselves small smiles of anticipation. Perhaps, suggested Ambassador Krendal of the Margan hegemony, this shows how little they value these negotiations, or how little they understand the reality of their situation. Thraxar studied the intelligence file on his personal display. The human arriving was identified as Captain Marcus Chun, age 34 standard years, born on Earth in a place called San Francisco. His military record showed service in something called the Human Defense Corps, with notations about various peacekeeping missions and training exercises. Nothing impressive by galactic standards. The file included a physical description that made several of the alien commanders chuckle. Height: 1.83 meters, barely half the size of a Korth AI warrior. Weight: 79.4 kilograms, less than a Margan child. No visible natural weapons, no apparent physical modifications, no cybernetic enhancements. He looked exactly like what he was, a member of a species that had evolved on a gentle world without significant predators, where the greatest natural disaster was weather that other species would consider mild climate variation. General, another aide announced, the human has completed docking procedures. He's requesting permission to board. Thrax head tilted. Just one. Yes, sir. Scans indicate a single life form aboard the shuttle. No weapons detected above standard diplomatic protection protocols. This was almost insulting. The Korth AI had brought their most decorated general, supported by the Coalition's most experienced diplomats, and backed by a fleet that could glass a continent. The humans had sent what appeared to be a mid-level military officer with no support staff. Very well, Thraxair decided. Bring him to the main conference chamber. Let him see exactly what he's dealing with. 20 minutes later, the chamber doors slid open with a deep pneumatic hiss. The assembled alien dignitaries turned their attention to the entrance, ready to observe this representative of humanity's naivety. Instead, they found themselves studying something unexpectedly complex. Marcus Chun walked into the chamber with the easy confidence of someone entering his own home. He wore a simple blue and gray uniform with minimal ornamentation, no elaborate medals or ceremonial weapons that other species use to display status. His equipment belt carried only basic items: a communication device, a data tablet, and what appeared to be a small emergency kit. He was, by every measurement they had, exactly as unremarkable as his file suggested. Yet something about his presence filled the massive chamber in a way that the assembled aliens found difficult to quantify. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored representatives of all species, Marcus said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber without technological amplification. I appreciate you taking the time for this meeting. Ambassador Krendal leaned forward, his metallic features reflecting the chamber's harsh lighting. You appreciate our time? Captain Shun, are you aware of the forces assembled here? The infinite dominion alone carries enough firepower to sterilize your planet's surface. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this information for the first time. That's quite a ship, he agreed. I noticed the modifications to the main guns when we docked. Impressive engineering work. Those look like Veltar focusing crystals integrated with Korth AI energy cores. Must have been a challenging technical project. General Thraxair's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. The human had identified specific technological components from a brief visual scan of their ship's exterior. Most species representatives needed detailed briefings to understand such technical aspects. The point, human, Thraxair rumbled, is that your species faces a simple choice. Join the coalition as a protected member species, or face the consequences of standing alone against forces beyond your comprehension. Marcus smiled, a facial expression that the aliens had learned to interpret as either friendliness or defiance, depending on context. I understand the choice, General. What I'm curious about is why the Coalition believes Earth needs protection. The question hung in the chamber's recycled air like an unexpected trap. Commander Vextai consulted his datapad. Your species has been in space for barely 50 years. Your fastest ships require months to travel distances that Coalition vessels cover in days. Your energy production is primarily fusion-based, which most civilizations abandoned centuries ago. Your military capabilities are limited. All accurate, Marcus acknowledged. So what exactly are we supposed to need protection from? The silence that followed was the kind that occurs when a question reveals an assumption that no one had previously examined. The Coalition had assembled this massive force to compel human compliance, but the specific threat they were protecting humanity from had never been clearly articulated. From other species, Ambassador Krendal said finally, from expansion-minded civilizations that would view Earth as a convenient target. Like the Coalition, Marcus asked gently. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. General Thraxair's claws extended involuntarily, a Korth AI stress response that he quickly controlled. The Coalition, he said carefully, maintains peace through strength and unified purpose. Member species enjoy protection, trade benefits, and technological advancement opportunities. And the cost of membership? Compliance with Coalition military directives, resource sharing agreements, and acceptance of Coalition governance in matters of interspecies relations. Marcus nodded slowly, as if genuinely considering the offer. So we give up our independence, our resources, and our right to make our own decisions. In exchange, you protect us from people who want to take our independence, our resources, and our right to make our own decisions. The logic loop was so obvious that several of the alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. The insectoid ZFTI began the rapid clicking pattern that indicated agitation. "You oversimplify," Commander Vextai interjected. "The galaxy is dangerous. Species that attempt to remain independent face constant threats from raiders, hostile expansion, resource conflicts, like the Korth AI Fourth Fleet." Marcus interrupted softly. The chamber fell completely silent. In that silence, General Thraxear realized he was looking at something his intelligence files had failed to capture. This human wasn't naive. He wasn't overwhelmed by the display of force. He wasn't even particularly impressed. Instead, he was calmly dissecting the Coalition's position with the precision of someone who understood exactly what game was being played. "Captain Chun," Thraxear said slowly, "you seem to misunderstand your situation. This fleet could destroy every major population center on your planet within hours." Marcus met the general's four-eyed gaze without flinching. "Yes, you could. The question is whether you would. What prevents us?" "The same thing that prevents most civilizations from committing genocide," Marcus replied. "The cost is usually higher than the benefit." Ambassador Krendal's metallic features contorted into what might have been a sneer. "Humans have nothing we cannot simply take by force." "If that were true," Marcus said calmly, "we wouldn't be having this conversation. You would have simply taken what you wanted." The observation landed like a physical blow. The assembled coalition representatives exchanged glances that carried messages of sudden uncertainty. They had indeed spent months attempting to pressure humanity into voluntary submission instead of simply conquering Earth outright. "Perhaps," suggested the crystalline Veltar representative in their chiming voice, "we should demonstrate our resolve." "A small kinetic strike on an uninhabited area would be an act of war," Marcus finished. "Are you prepared for Earth to be at war with the Coalition?" The question should have been laughable. Earth's entire defensive fleet consisted of perhaps 24 ships, none larger than a Coalition destroyer. Their population was confined to a single star system. Their technology was generations behind Coalition standard. Yet somehow, the idea of humanity at war didn't feel laughable to anyone in the chamber. General Thraxear studied the human with new attention. Marcus Chun stood relaxed but alert, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing steady. There was something in his posture that reminded the Korth AI general of a predator at rest. Not aggressive, but absolutely ready for violence, if necessary. "You speak of war as if your species has experience with it," Thraxear observed. "Every species has experience with war, General. The difference is how recently, how extensively, and how successfully. And humanity's experience?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than his individual experience. "Earth's surface is 70% water," he said finally. "The remaining 30% of land mass has been fought over continuously for the entire history of our species. We've had wars that lasted decades, wars that spanned continents, wars that consumed entire generations. We fought over resources, territory, ideas, religions, and sometimes just because we couldn't figure out how to stop fighting." He paused, and his next words carried the quiet certainty of absolute fact. "We are very, very good at war." The chamber's atmosphere had changed completely. The assembled aliens found themselves reassessing everything they thought they knew about the species they dismissed as inexperienced newcomers. "But," Marcus continued, "we're even better at choosing when not to fight. We've learned that the most expensive victory is often indistinguishable from defeat. We've also learned that some things are worth any cost." "Such as?" Ambassador Krendal asked, though his voice had lost much of its earlier arrogance. "Independence," Marcus replied simply, "The right to make our own mistakes. The freedom to choose our own path among the stars." General Thraxar felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of military campaigns: genuine uncertainty about the outcome of a confrontation. This human hadn't threatened them, hadn't boasted about hidden weapons or secret alliances. Instead, he had quietly demonstrated that the Coalition's understanding of humanity was fundamentally incomplete. "Captain Shun," the general said finally, "what exactly are you proposing?" Marcus smiled again, but this time the expression carried the warmth of genuine friendship. "I'm proposing that we skip the part where you try to intimidate us into submission. We refuse, you escalate to actual threats, we respond proportionally, and everyone ends up spending years and countless lives discovering what we could have learned today through honest conversation, which is that humanity values good neighbors over powerful masters. We're happy to trade, cooperate, share knowledge, and even provide mutual defense agreements. But we will not surrender our sovereignty to anyone, for any reason, at any cost." The chamber fell into thoughtful silence. The Coalition representatives were faced with a choice they hadn't expected to confront: accept humanity as an independent neighbor or commit to the kind of prolonged conflict that had devastated entire sectors of the galaxy in previous centuries. Commander Vextai leaned close to General Thraxar and whispered, "Sir, our intelligence reports suggest their entire defensive capability could be neutralized within days." Marcus, despite being across the chamber, somehow heard the whispered comment. "Commander, your intelligence reports are probably accurate. Earth's official defensive fleet is exactly as limited as your data suggests." Thraxar felt his warrior instincts activate. Official defensive fleet? The ships and weapons that appear in our public records, that participate in our exercises, that patrol our system openly. Marcus's expression remained friendly, but something had changed in his eyes. "The ones your intelligence services have been observing and cataloging for months." The implications hit every alien representative simultaneously. If humanity's visible defenses were intentionally limited, what did their actual capabilities look like? Ambassador Krindal leaned forward aggressively. "Are you claiming your species as hidden military assets?" "I'm not claiming anything," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm simply noting that most intelligent species don't advertise their full defensive capabilities to potential enemies." "We are not enemies," General Thraxar said firmly. "No," Marcus agreed. "But you're not friends either. You're representatives of a coalition that has spent months studying our weaknesses and positioning military assets to exploit them. That's not hostile behavior, but it's not friendly behavior either." The accuracy of the observation was uncomfortable for everyone in the chamber. The Coalition had indeed been preparing for potential military action against Earth for the better part of a year. However, Marcus continued, "I believe we can change that dynamic. Earth is interested in establishing genuine diplomatic relations with the Coalition, not as a member species, but as an independent neighbor. We have things to offer, and there are things we could use help with, such as," the Veltar representative chimed. "Our medical technology is apparently more advanced than your records suggest. We've had promising results with regenerative therapies that might interest species dealing with age-related cellular breakdown. Our computational systems use some novel approaches that could enhance certain types of data analysis. And our agricultural techniques have produced food varieties that many species find appealing." This was news to the Coalition representatives. Their intelligence suggested that human technology was uniformly primitive compared to galactic standards. In exchange, Marcus went on, "We could use help with faster-than-light communication systems, improved energy storage for long-range vessels, and some of the exotic materials that are common in Coalition space, but rare in our system." General Thraxar found himself genuinely intrigued. This conversation had become something entirely different from what he'd expected. Instead of delivering ultimatums to a primitive species, he was engaging in actual negotiations with someone who understood the complexities of interstellar relations. "Captain," he said, "you seem remarkably well informed about coalition capabilities and needs." Marcus nodded. "We've been studying you as carefully as you've been studying us, General. The difference is that we've been looking for opportunities for mutual benefit rather than vulnerabilities to exploit." The chamber filled with the subtle sounds of alien thought processes, clicking, chiming, low rumbles, and the whisper of scaled skin against metal. The coalition representatives were reconsidering not just their approach to humanity, but their assumptions about human capabilities and intentions. Finally, Ambassador Krendal spoke. "You present an interesting proposition, Captain, but the coalition has protocols for dealing with independent species. There are procedures, requirements, standards that must be met." "Understand," Marcus replied. "What we're asking for is the opportunity to meet those standards through cooperation rather than conquest." General Thraxayar made a decision that would have surprised his subordinates who knew him only as a conqueror. "Captain Shun, I am willing to recommend to the Coalition Council that we pursue diplomatic relations with Earth as an independent entity." The words hung in the chamber like an unexpected gift. Several of the other representatives showed signs of surprise. This was not the outcome they had expected. However, Thraxayar continued, "Such a recommendation will require evidence that humanity can meaningfully contribute to galactic stability and security. Words alone will not satisfy the Council." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "What kind of evidence would be sufficient?" "A demonstration of capability. Something that shows your species possesses resources or abilities that would make you a valuable neighbor rather than a potential problem." For the first time since entering the chamber, Marcus hesitated. He appeared to be weighing options, considering consequences, perhaps consulting with distant advisors through some undetectable communication method. "General," he said finally, "I can't provide such a demonstration. But I want to be very clear about something first. Yes, what you're about to see represents a tiny fraction of humanity's actual capabilities. We're not showing you this to threaten you or to start some kind of arms race. We're showing you this because we want you to understand that Earth's desire for peaceful coexistence comes from strength, not weakness." The chamber's attention focused completely on the human representative. Several aliens activated recording devices, preparing to document whatever revelation was about to occur. Marcus reached for his communication device, a simple handheld unit that looked like basic technology by galactic standards. He spoke a single word into it: Achilles. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The coalition representatives began to wonder if this was some kind of human cultural ritual or perhaps a delay tactic. Then, Commander Vextai's tactical board began screaming alarms. "General," he shouted, his voice breaking with shock. "Incoming ships. Multiple contacts. They're right on top of us." The chamber's main display activated, showing the tactical situation around the coalition fleet. What had been empty space moments before now contained 17 vessels of completely unknown design. They hadn't jumped in from hyperspace. The energy signatures would have been detected minutes in advance. They hadn't approached from normal space. The fleet's sensors would have tracked them for hours. They had simply appeared, as if they had been invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. General Thraxayar stared at the display in professional amazement. The ships were sleek, dark, and roughly the same size as coalition destroyers. But their energy signatures were unlike anything in his experience, and their positioning was absolutely perfect for either defensive or offensive action. "How long have they been there?" he asked quietly. Commander Vextai checked his instruments with shaking hands. "Sir, based on the stealth technology they must be using, they could have been there when we arrived. They could have been there for days." Marcus stepped forward, his manner still calm and friendly. "General, I'd like you to meet a small portion of Earth's Deep Space Defense Corps. They've been keeping an eye on this meeting to ensure my safety." The implications crashed over the coalition representatives like a wave of ice water. Not only did humanity possess military technology advanced enough to defeat their sensors completely, but they had been under observation by potentially hostile forces throughout the entire negotiation. The ships your intelligence services have cataloged, Marcus continued conversationally, belong to our home defense fleet. They're designed for system patrol and basic security. The Deep Space Corps handles other responsibilities. Ambassador Krindal found his voice, though it came out as a whisper. How many ships? In the Deep Space Corps? That's classified, I'm afraid. But I can tell you that the 17 ships you're currently looking at represent a single patrol squadron. General Thraxear felt the foundations of his military understanding shifting beneath him. If this was a patrol squadron, what did humanity's main battle fleet look like? More importantly, how had the Coalition's intelligence services completely missed the existence of advanced human military technology? Captain, he said slowly, your species has been deliberately concealing your true capabilities. Marcus shrugged slightly. Every intelligent species conceals some capabilities. The question is whether they use that concealment to enable aggression or to preserve peace. Earth chose peace. Until now, Commander Vextai said, his voice carrying the undertone of a threat. The temperature in the chamber dropped even further as Marcus turned his attention to the Korth AI commander. When he spoke, his voice remained calm, but something fundamental had changed in his demeanor. Commander, are you under the impression that revealing our capabilities represents preparation for aggression? It could be interpreted as such. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and in that silence, General Thraxear recognized something he had seen before in truly dangerous opponents. The moment when friendliness ends and something much more primal takes its place. Commander, Marcus said softly, if humanity were preparing for aggression, this conversation would not be taking place. Your fleet would have been disabled before you realized we were here. Your ship would be under our control, and you would be choosing between surrender and annihilation. The words carried the absolute certainty of someone stating basic facts rather than making threats. Instead, Marcus continued, his voice returning to its earlier warmth. We're offering friendship, trade, and mutual cooperation. The choice of how to respond belongs entirely to you. General Thraxear looked at the tactical display, where 17 impossible human ships waited in perfect formation. He looked at Marcus Chun, who stood relaxed and confident despite being surrounded by representatives of species that could crush normal humans without effort. He thought about the months of intelligence gathering that had apparently revealed nothing about humanity's true nature. Then, he made the second decision that would define the rest of his career. Captain Chun, he said formally, on behalf of the Korth AI 4th Fleet and the Coalition forces under my command, I accept your proposal for diplomatic negotiations between the Coalition and Earth as independent entities. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter from various alien representatives, but General Thraxear ignored them. He had recognized something that his intelligence files had missed. Humanity wasn't a primitive species that needed protection or conquest. They were a mature civilization that had chosen to appear less advanced than they actually were, right up until the moment when honesty became necessary. Marcus smiled, this time with genuine warmth and relief. Thank you, General. I think this is the beginning of a very beneficial relationship for everyone involved. As the formal negotiations began in earnest, none of the Coalition representatives noticed the small detail that would later prove most significant. Marcus Chun had never actually confirmed how many ships humanity possessed, how advanced their technology really was, or what other capabilities they had chosen not to reveal. He had simply demonstrated that Earth's desire for peace was a choice made from strength, not a plea made from weakness. The difference, as the galaxy would soon learn, was everything. The formal diplomatic protocols that followed General Thraxear's acceptance took 3 hours to complete. During that time, the 17 human ships maintained their perfect formation around the Coalition fleet, neither aggressive nor retreating. They simply existed in space like patient guardians, their presence a constant reminder that the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy had shifted permanently. Marcus Chun had been provided with a guest quarters aboard the Infinite Dominion, while the coalition representatives contacted their respective governments. The room was designed for Korth AI physiology, making everything oversized from a human perspective, but Marcus seemed comfortable enough as he reviewed reports on his personal data tablet. General Thrax AR found him there 2 hours after the initial negotiations, studying what appeared to be agricultural reports with the same focus most military officers reserve for battle plans. "Captain," Thrax AR said, his massive frame filling the doorway, "I hope we might speak privately." Marcus looked up from his tablet and gestured to one of the oversized chairs. "Of course, General. Please sit." Thrax AR settled into the chair with the careful movements of someone whose body was designed for combat rather than comfort. "I have been a military commander for 43 standard years," he began without preamble. "I have fought against 17 different species across 22 star systems. I pride myself on understanding warfare, strategy, and the capabilities of potential enemies." Marcus waited patiently, sensing that the Korth AI general had something important to communicate. "Your species," Thrax AR continued, "has made me question everything I believed I understood about military intelligence." "How so?" The general's 4 eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. "Those ships outside, they use technology that our most advanced sensors cannot properly analyze. They appeared in space without any detectable transition signature. They maintain perfect formation without any visible communication between vessels. And, according to my tactical officers, their weapon systems are completely unrecognizable." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Technology has a way of developing along different paths when civilizations evolve in isolation. "That is not what concerns me," Thrax AR said firmly. "What concerns me is that our intelligence services have been studying your species for over a year, and we detected none of this. Either your operational security is beyond anything we've encountered, or those ships were not built by the civilization our intelligence services have been observing." The statement hung in the air like an accusation, and a question rolled into one. Marcus set down his tablet and gave the Korth AI general his full attention. "General, let me ask you something. When your intelligence services studied Earth, what did they focus on?" "Standard intelligence gathering protocols, population centers, industrial capacity, energy production, military installations, technological development indicators, resource extraction operations, all surface activities," Marcus interrupted gently. Thrax AR's head tilted in confusion. "Where else would we look? Earth is an ocean world, General. 70% water, with an average depth of nearly 4 kilometers. Our planet has more habitable space below the surface of the water than above it." The implications of this statement began to dawn on the Korth AI commander. "Are you suggesting that humanity has developed a significant underwater civilization?" "I'm suggesting that most species make assumptions about other species based on their own evolutionary path. The Korth AI evolved on a dry world with limited water resources. When you look at planets, you naturally focus on the land masses because that's where your people would live." Marcus stood and moved to the chamber's viewing port, where the blue-green curve of Earth was visible in the distance. "Humans evolved from aquatic ancestors. We're comfortable in water in ways that most galactic species find unusual. When we began expanding our civilization, it was natural for us to expand in all directions, including down." General Thrax AR joined him at the viewing port. From this distance, Earth looked exactly like the intelligence reports had described it, a peaceful world with moderate technology and a relatively small population. "How much of your civilization is underwater?" "Most of it," Marcus replied simply. "The cities you can see from orbit represent maybe 20% of our total population. The industrial facilities your sensors detected account for about 15% of our manufacturing capacity. The military installations your intelligence services cataloged." He paused and smiled. "Well, let's just say they serve their intended purpose of being cataloged." The Korth AI general felt something between admiration and horror as he realized the scope of his miscalculation. For over a year, we have been preparing to confront a civilization that doesn't actually exist. Oh, it exists, Marcus assured him. The surface cities are real, and the people living there are genuinely living their lives. But they're not the whole story. What is the whole story? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, apparently deciding how much to reveal. General, humanity learned a long time ago that survival sometimes depends on being underestimated. We've been in space for 50 years, but we've been preparing for the possibility of hostile contact for much longer than that. How much longer? About 300 years. Thraxar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed this information. Before you achieved spaceflight? Long before. You see, General, humans have always known we weren't alone in the universe. Basic probability suggested that other intelligent species existed somewhere among the stars. The question wasn't whether we would eventually encounter them. It was whether that encounter would be friendly or hostile. Marcus turned away from the viewing port and faced the massive alien directly. We decided to prepare for both possibilities. And you chose to prepare in secret. We chose to prepare intelligently. If hostile species eventually found Earth, we wanted them to see exactly what your intelligence services saw, a young, primitive civilization that posed no significant threat. Meanwhile, we developed our actual capabilities away from prying eyes. General Thraxar had commanded fleets that could devastate entire worlds, but he found himself feeling genuinely unsettled by this conversation. How advanced are your actual capabilities? Advanced enough, Marcus replied diplomatically. That is not an answer. Marcus smiled with what appeared to be genuine regret. It's the only answer I can give you right now, General. What I can tell you is that Earth's policy toward other species is based on reciprocity. We respond to friendship with friendship, to trade offers with trade offers, to threats with proportional responses. And to invasion attempts? We haven't had to deal with that scenario yet, Marcus said quietly. We're hoping we never do. The unspoken implication was clear. Humanity had prepared for that scenario as thoroughly as they had prepared for every other possibility. Before General Thraxar could respond, his communication device activated with an urgent priority signal. General, we have a situation developing. Commander Vextai's voice carried obvious stress. Long-range sensors are detecting a large fleet approaching this system. They're not responding to hails. Marcus immediately activated his own communication device. Control, this is Chun. What's the situation? A crisp female voice responded instantly. Captain, we're tracking 43 vessels on approach vector. Configuration suggests hegemony assault formation. Estimated time to weapons range, 18 minutes. General Thraxar felt his warrior instincts activate as he recognized the tactical implications. The Margan hegemony had apparently decided that diplomacy was taking too long and had dispatched their own fleet to resolve the Earth situation through force. Captain, he said urgently, the Margan assault fleets are equipped with planet crackers. They're not coming here to negotiate. They're coming to end this situation permanently. Marcus nodded calmly, seemingly unsurprised by this development. General, I need to ask you to make a choice right now. What choice? The Coalition fleet can withdraw from this system immediately, or you can remain and observe what happens when someone actually threatens Earth directly. The weight of the decision was enormous. If Thraxar withdrew, he would miss the opportunity to observe humanity's true military capabilities in action. If he stayed, his fleet might be caught in the middle of a battle between two forces whose actual strength he didn't understand. What are your intentions toward the Coalition fleet? He asked. As long as Coalition vessels don't participate in hostile actions against Earth or human ships, they will not be targeted. Marcus replied immediately. You're welcome to observe from a safe distance. General Thraxar made his third career-defining decision in less than 6 hours. We will remain and observe. Marcus spoke into his communication device again. Control. Coalition fleet is non-hostile observer status. They are not to be engaged under any circumstances. Understood, Captain. 17 minutes to contact. The next few minutes were a controlled chaos of preparation. Coalition vessels moved to positions that would provide good observation angles while staying clear of potential battle zones. The 17 human ships that had been maintaining formation around the Coalition fleet began to spread into a different configuration, one that General Thrax AR's tactical training recognized as a defensive screen. "Captain," he said, studying the tactical display, 17 ships against 43 seems like poor odds. Marcus checked his chronometer. It would be if those are the only ships involved. "Are you expecting reinforcements?" "General, let me show you what happens when someone decides to attack Earth directly instead of trying to negotiate." The Margan hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly on schedule, their massive dreadnoughts and heavy cruisers arranged in the kind of formation designed to overwhelm planetary defenses through sheer firepower. Fleet Admiral Zontai commanded the expedition from his flagship Inevitable Victory, a vessel so large that it registered on sensors as a small moon. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we are detecting the Korth AI 4th Fleet at the edge of the system. They appear to be in observer position." "Ignore them," Zontai ordered. "Focus on the human vessels." "How many are we facing?" 17 ships, sir. Destroyer class by Sci's estimation. Admiral Zontai allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Margan hegemony had grown tired of the Coalition's diplomatic approach to the Earth problem. Humans have been allowed to maintain their independence for too long, creating a precedent that other species might follow. It was time to demonstrate what happened to civilizations that refused to accept their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. "Signal all ships," he commanded. "Begin bombardment of the planet. Ignore the human vessels unless they interfere." The order was barely transmitted when the tactical situation changed completely. Space around the Margan fleet began to shimmer and distort, as if reality itself was bending. Then, in a display that defied everything Admiral Zontai understood about physics and space warfare, ships began appearing everywhere. Not 17 ships, not 70 ships. Hundreds of vessels materialized around the Margan fleet in perfect three-dimensional formation, their dark hulls reflecting no light, their presence somehow making space itself seem deeper and more dangerous. "Tactical report," Zontai barked, his voice cracking with shock. "Sir, we are detecting. I can't get an accurate count. At least 300 vessels, possibly more. They appear to be using some kind of dimensional folding technology that's interfering with our sensors." On the bridge of the Infinite Dominion, General Thraxar watched the tactical display with professional fascination and growing horror. The human fleet that had just revealed itself wasn't just larger than anything he had expected. It was organized with a precision that suggested levels of coordination and training that took decades to achieve. "Captain," he said quietly, "how long has humanity been preparing for this?" Marcus checked his communication device as status reports flooded in from the human fleet. "Since we first detected artificial signals from deep space, General, about 140 years ago. You've been building a military fleet for nearly a century and a half." "We've been building the capacity to defend ourselves," Marcus corrected. "There's a difference." Admiral Zontai's voice cut across the communication channels on all frequencies. "Human vessels, this is Fleet Admiral Zontai of the Margan hegemony. You are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender immediately or face annihilation." The response came not from Marcus, but from the human fleet itself. A new voice, calm and professional, spoke with the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Admiral Zontai, this is Fleet Commander Sarah Okafor of the Earth Defense Corps. You have entered the Sol system with hostile intent and have threatened violence against a peaceful civilization. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures, or we will interpret your continued presence as an act of war." Zontai's response was exactly what everyone expected from a Margan military commander. "Begin bombardment." What happened next redefined space warfare for every species watching. The Margan fleet opened fire with everything they had: plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, kinetic bombardment systems, and exotic energy weapons that could crack continental plates. It was a display of firepower sufficient to sterilize most inhabited worlds. None of it reached Earth. The human fleet moved with coordination that seemed impossible for individual ships. They flowed around the incoming fire like water around stones, their formation shifting and adapting in real time. When Margan weapons did manage to target human vessels, they struck barriers of energy that absorbed and redistributed the attacks harmlessly. But it was a human response that shocked every observer. Instead of returning fire with conventional weapons, the human ships began to emit a form of energy that interfered with matter at a subatomic level. Margan vessels simply stopped working. Their engines shut down, their weapons went offline, their life support systems continued to function, but everything else became inert. Within 6 minutes, the entire Margan fleet was dead in space, completely disabled, but with all crew members alive and unharmed. Fleet Commander Okafor's voice returned to the communication channels. Admiral Zontai, your fleet has been neutralized. Your crews are safe, but your vessels are no longer functional. Margan rescue ships may enter the system to retrieve your personnel, but any attempt to reactivate your weapons systems or resume hostile actions will result in permanent disabling of your ships. The silence that followed was profound. Admiral Zontai, who had commanded successful campaigns against 12 different species, found himself completely helpless in the space of 6 minutes. General Thraxear stared at the tactical display, trying to comprehend what he had just witnessed. Captain, what kind of weapon was that? Marcus looked tired, as if the demonstration had cost him something personally. It's not really a weapon, General. It's more like a shutdown command. Our technology is based on different principles than most galactic civilizations use. We can interfere with the quantum foundations of other technologies without actually destroying anything. You can disable any ship in space, any ship using technology based on principles we understand, yes. The implications were staggering. If humanity could neutralize enemy fleets without actually destroying them, they possessed the ability to end space battles before they began. General, Marcus continued, this is why Earth prefers diplomacy. We could have disabled the Coalition fleet when you first arrived. We could have disabled every hostile fleet that has approached our system over the past 50 years. Instead, we chose to talk. Thraxear realized he was looking at something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization that possessed overwhelming military superiority, but used it only for defense. Why? Because destroying your enemies makes you stronger for a while, Marcus replied quietly. But teaching your enemies to become your friends makes you stronger forever. Over the next several hours, the situation in the Sol system stabilized into something resembling organized chaos. Margan rescue fleets arrived to retrieve their disabled crews. Coalition command ships arrived to establish formal diplomatic protocols. And slowly, carefully, the human fleet that had appeared so suddenly began to fade back into invisibility. General Thraxear spent most of that time in conversation with Marcus Chun, trying to understand the civilization he had so completely underestimated. Captain, I must ask, if your species has possessed these capabilities for decades, why did you allow the galaxy to believe you were primitive? Marcus smiled with what appeared to be genuine sadness. General, in our experience, there are two types of civilizations that develop advanced military technology. Those who use it to conquer others, and those who use it to protect themselves. We wanted to be very sure which type we were before we revealed our true capabilities. And what did you decide? We decided that the measure of a civilization isn't how effectively it can destroy its enemies, Marcus said quietly. It's how successfully it can avoid having enemies in the first place. General Thraxear looked out at Earth, still peaceful and beautiful in the distance, and realized that his understanding of strength and weakness had been permanently altered. Captain Chun, he said formally, on behalf of the Coalition Defense Forces, I would like to propose a formal alliance between the Coalition and Earth. Not membership? Marcus asked with a slight smile. Independent alliance. Thraxar clarified. Between equals. Marcus extended his hand in a human gesture of friendship. I think that sounds like an excellent place to start, General. As the Korth AI commander shook the human's hand, he couldn't help but think that this day had changed the galaxy in ways that no one fully understood yet. He was absolutely right. 2 weeks after the incident in the Sol system, General Thraxar found himself in a situation he had never anticipated, sitting in a human underwater city, breathing recycled air, and trying to understand how an entire civilization had hidden beneath the waves for over 2 centuries. New Atlantica was humanity's first deep ocean metropolis, built in what humans called the Mariana Trench. The city stretched for kilometers along the ocean floor, its bioluminescent towers reaching up toward the distant surface like fingers grasping for light that would never quite reach them. The technology required to build such a place was staggering. Not just the engineering challenges of dealing with crushing pressure and corrosive salt water, but the ecological integration that made the city seem like a natural part of the ocean ecosystem. General, welcome to humanity's oldest permanent settlement, Dr. Elena Vasquez said as she guided him through the main transit hub. She was a marine biologist and city administrator, one of the original designers of New Atlantica's ecosystem integration systems. I hope the atmospheric adjustment isn't too uncomfortable. Thraxar tested his breathing apparatus, a human design system that allowed his Korth AI physiology to process the high humidity, high-pressure atmosphere of the underwater city. It is different, but functional. They moved through corridors that curved and flowed like natural underwater caves, but were obviously constructed with technology that surpassed anything the Coalition had developed for underwater operations. The walls themselves seemed to be alive, covered with bioluminescent organisms that provided light and, according to Dr. Vasquez, helped process the city's waste products. How long have humans been living underwater? Thraxar asked as they passed a viewing window that looked out into the deep ocean. Strange creatures moved past in the darkness, some that looked natural, others that were obviously artificial constructs. Permanently? About 230 years. The first experimental habitats were built in the 1800s, but they were small research stations. New Atlantica was established in 1847, making it older than most of our surface cities. The timeline was stunning. Humans have been developing advanced underwater technology for longer than most Coalition species had been in space. Dr. Vasquez, Thraxar said carefully, your surface settlements appear to use technology that is generations behind what I am observing here. She smiled with what appeared to be amusement. That's intentional, General. When we first detected artificial signals from space, we realized that any civilization capable of interstellar travel was probably capable of observing our planet from orbit. We wanted to control what they saw. They entered a massive chamber that served as the city's central hub. The space was filled with humans going about their daily lives, children playing in low-gravity water zones, adults working at control systems that managed everything from food production to environmental systems, elderly people tending gardens that seemed to grow impossible varieties of plants in salt water. This is a functioning society, Thraxar observed. Not just a military installation. Of course it is. General, humans don't just build weapons and wait for wars. We build places to live, families to protect, cultures to preserve. The defensive capabilities you witnessed in space exist to protect this, not the other way around. They continued deeper into the city, and Thraxar began to understand the scope of what he was seeing. This wasn't just a single settlement. It was a model for an entire branch of human civilization that had developed completely independently of the surface world that Galactic Intelligence Services had been studying. How many of these cities exist, he asked. Underwater? 43 major settlements, hundreds of smaller outposts, and research stations. But, General, the ocean cities are just one aspect of human expansion. We've also been developing settlements in places that most species would consider uninhabitable, such as Dr. Vasquez led him to another viewing window, this one displaying a three-dimensional map of what appeared to be the interior structure of Earth itself. Underground cities in the deep rock layers. Arctic settlements that exist entirely beneath the ice. Desert complexes that are completely hidden beneath sand dunes. High-altitude installations that float in the upper atmosphere. The map was a revelation. The Earth that Galactic Intelligence Services had observed from orbit was literally just the surface of human civilization. The actual population and industrial capacity was distributed across environments that orbital observation couldn't detect. Dr. Vasquez, how many humans actually exist? She paused for a moment, apparently consulting some internal calculation. Current population across all environments is approximately 47 billion individuals. General Thraxar felt his four eyes widen involuntarily. Coalition intelligence had estimated Earth's population at around 8 billion, the number of humans living in visible surface cities. The actual number was nearly 6 times larger. 47 billion, he repeated slowly, and they all live in hidden settlements. Not hidden, General, just not visible from orbit. There's a difference. They continued through the city, and Thraxiar began to notice details that revealed the true sophistication of human technology. The transportation systems used principles that seemed to manipulate gravity itself. The communication networks operated on quantum entanglement systems that provided instantaneous contact across any distance. The manufacturing facilities produced materials that his training told him should be impossible to create. Dr. Vasquez, I must ask, how advanced is human technology compared to coalition standards? She considered the question carefully. That's difficult to answer, General. Coalition technology focuses on certain areas: space travel, energy weapons, large-scale construction. Human technology has developed along different lines, such as biological integration, environmental harmony, consciousness enhancement, quantum manipulation. She paused. General, we've been developing technology for survival in hostile environments for much longer than we've been developing technology for space travel. When you're trying to build a civilization on the bottom of the ocean, you solve different problems than when you're trying to build one on the surface of a dry planet. They entered what Dr. Vasquez called the Cultural Center, a massive space filled with art, music, and displays that represented human achievement across all environments. Thraxair found himself studying a sculpture that seemed to be carved from living coral, growing and changing as he watched. "This is beautiful," he said, surprised by his own aesthetic response. "Thank you." It was created by a collective of artists from 7 different underwater cities. The coral is engineered to respond to the emotional resonance of observers. It changes color and form based on how people feel when they look at it. Thraxair studied the sculpture more carefully and realized that it had indeed been shifting its colors since he began observing it. "You have developed technology that responds to emotions?" "We've developed technology that enhances what was already there, General. Humans have always been good at reading emotions, building communities, creating art that speaks to something deeper than logic. We just found ways to make those abilities more effective." The implications were staggering. If humans had developed technology that could interface directly with consciousness and emotion, their capabilities extended far beyond anything that could be measured through traditional intelligence gathering. "Dr. Vasquez," Thraxair said slowly, "I am beginning to understand that my species' concept of advanced technology may be somewhat limited." She nodded thoughtfully. Most galactic civilizations seem to focus on making things bigger, faster, more powerful. Humans tend to focus on making things more integrated, more sustainable, more harmonious. Is that why your defensive systems disable rather than destroy? Partly yes, but also because we've learned that destroyed enemies have a way of creating new enemies. Disabled enemies can become friends, given time and proper incentives. They spent the next several hours exploring different sections of New Atlantica. Thraxair observed educational systems that seemed to download information directly into students' minds. He saw medical facilities where humans were regenerating lost limbs and organs using techniques that appeared to accelerate natural healing by thousands of times. He watched manufacturing processes where raw materials were transformed into finished products through what looked like controlled biological growth. General Dr. Vasquez said as they entered the city's command center, "There's something else you should see." The command center was filled with displays showing data from across Earth's hidden civilization. Population statistics, resource allocation, technological development projects, and environmental monitoring data flowed across screens in patterns that were almost hypnotically complex. "What am I looking at?" Thraxair asked. "Real-time coordination of 47 billion individuals across hundreds of settlements in dozens of different environments," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Every human on Earth is connected to this network, not controlled by it, connected to it. We make collective decisions, share resources, coordinate research projects, and respond to threats as a unified civilization. All 47 billion people are connected simultaneously. Through quantum consciousness networks, yes. It's not a hive mind. Every individual retains complete personal autonomy. But we can share information, emotions, and decisions instantly across any distance." General Thraxair stared at the displays, trying to comprehend the implications of what he was seeing. Dr. Vasquez, this level of coordination would allow for military responses that no opposing force could predict or counter. It would, she agreed. But more importantly, it allows for levels of cooperation and resource sharing that make military responses unnecessary most of the time. A new voice joined the conversation from behind them. "General, I hope Dr. Vasquez has been able to answer some of your questions." Thraxair turned to see Marcus Chin approaching, no longer wearing his diplomatic uniform, but instead dressed in the flowing, organic-looking clothing that seemed standard for the underwater cities. "Captain Chun, yes, this visit has been illuminating." Marcus smiled. "I imagine it has. General, there's one more thing I'd like to show you, if you're willing to go a bit deeper." "Deeper?" "Below the city, to where we keep our real research projects." They descended through the city's lower levels, past sections that Dr. Vasquez explained were dedicated to deep ocean exploration, geological research, and what she termed consciousness expansion experiments. Finally, they reached a transport pod that carried them down through the ocean floor itself, into constructed tunnels that extended deep into the Earth's crust. "Captain, where are we going?" Thraxair asked as the pod accelerated through passages that seemed to extend for kilometers. "To meet someone who can better explain humanity's long-term perspective on galactic relations," Marcus replied. "General, how much do you know about human lifespan?" "Coalition intelligence suggests approximately 100 years under optimal conditions." Marcus and Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances that carried meaning Thraxair couldn't interpret. "That's accurate for surface humans living under normal conditions," Marcus said carefully. "But, General, we've been working on extending human lifespan for over 2 centuries. How successfully? You're about to meet someone who can answer that question directly." The transport pod emerged into a chamber so large that Thraxair couldn't see the far walls. The space was filled with gardens that seemed to exist in perfect ecological balance, with streams and pools that reflected lights from sources he couldn't identify. The air itself seemed different here, more alive somehow, charged with possibilities. An elderly human approached them, moving with the careful grace of someone whose body had seen many years, but whose mind remained sharp and alert. She appeared to be perhaps 200 years old, though her eyes held depths that suggested even greater age. "General Thraxair," she said, her voice carrying the weight of vast experience. "I am Dr. Elizabeth Chun, director of the Long-Term Survival Project. I'm also Marcus's great-great-grandmother." Thraxair looked between Marcus and the elderly woman, trying to calculate the implications. "How old are you, Dr. Chun?" "I was born in 1847, General. The same year we established New Atlantica. I am 178 years old." The number was impossible. No human should be able to live that long while remaining mentally and physically functional. Yet here she stood, obviously alert and healthy despite an age that should have been fatal decades ago. How? Thraxear asked simply. Biological optimization, consciousness enhancement, environmental integration, Dr. Elizabeth Chun replied. General, when you're planning for the survival of your species across centuries rather than decades, you solve different problems. She led them deeper into the chamber, past sections that seemed dedicated to research projects that defied Thraxear's understanding of science. General, humanity began preparing for contact with galactic civilization 140 years ago. But we began preparing for long-term survival as a species much earlier than that. How much earlier? When we first realized that Earth's surface environment was fragile and that our growing population would eventually exhaust easily accessible resources. About 400 years ago, Dr. Elizabeth Chun stopped beside a pool of water that seemed to glow with its own light. General, most species develop technology to exploit their environment more efficiently. Humans develop technology to integrate with our environment more completely. She gestured to the glowing pool. This is a bacterial culture that was designed to process organic waste into useful materials. But more than that, it's a living system that learns, adapts, and improves itself over time. We didn't just solve the problem of waste management. We created a partner species that helps us solve problems we haven't even encountered yet. Thraxear looked around the vast chamber with new understanding. This entire facility is alive. In a sense, yes. General, human technology isn't just about building better machines. It's about creating sustainable relationships between consciousness, biology, and environment that can last for geological periods of time. Marcus spoke up from beside them. General, this is why Earth chose to appear less advanced than we actually are. We wanted to understand whether galactic civilization was focused on short-term exploitation or long-term sustainability. And what did you conclude? Dr. Elizabeth Chun answered with the calm certainty of someone who had spent over a century studying the question. Most galactic species are still thinking in terms of conquering their environment rather than integrating with it. They build bigger ships, more powerful weapons, more efficient resource extraction systems. But they don't build sustainable relationships. She paused beside another research area where humans were working with what appeared to be living computers, biological systems that processed information through quantum cellular networks. General, humanity's goal isn't to become the dominant species in the galaxy. Our goal is to ensure that intelligent life continues to exist and develop for as long as the universe will allow it. How long is that? Based on our current understanding of cosmic evolution, potentially trillions of years. The timescale was beyond anything Thraxear had ever considered. Most military planning focused on decades at most. Most political planning focused on centuries. These humans were thinking in terms of geological ages. Dr. Chun, are you suggesting that humanity is planning for survival across trillions of years? We're planning for the survival of consciousness itself, General. Not just human consciousness, all consciousness. Intelligence is the rarest and most precious thing in the universe. Once it's gone, it may never develop again. They continued through the facility, and Thraxear began to understand that he wasn't just looking at advanced technology or hidden military capabilities. He was looking at a completely different approach to existence itself. General, Marcus said as they concluded the tour, this is why Earth values peaceful relationships with other species. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy or even defend ourselves from it. We're trying to help ensure that all intelligent species continue to exist and develop for as long as possible. General Thraxear found himself in the unusual position of feeling humbled by a species he had originally intended to conquer. Captain, your species thinks on timescales that make most galactic politics seem trivial. Not trivial, Dr. Elizabeth Chun corrected gently, but perhaps somewhat short-sighted. General, the conflicts between the coalition, the hegemony, and various independent species are important in the short term. But in the long term, what matters is whether intelligent life survives and continues to develop. And You believe cooperation is more likely to achieve that goal than conquest. We've been testing that hypothesis for over 400 years, she replied. So far, the results support cooperation. As they prepared to return to the surface, General Thraxar realized that his understanding of humanity's place in galactic civilization needed to be completely reconsidered. They weren't a primitive species that needed protection or conquest. They weren't even an advanced species that posed a threat to the existing order. They were something entirely new, a civilization that had chosen to optimize for survival across timescales that made current galactic politics look like children's games. Captain Chun, he said formally, I would like to propose that the Coalition establish a long-term research partnership with Earth. What kind of research? Marcus asked. The kind that focuses on questions larger than who controls which star systems or trade routes, Thraxar replied. The kind that focuses on ensuring that this conversation can continue for as long as the universe allows it. Marcus smiled, the same calm, confident expression that had marked their first meeting. General, I think that's exactly the kind of relationship Earth has been hoping for. As they ascended toward the surface, Thraxar couldn't help but think that today had changed not just his understanding of humanity, but his understanding of what intelligent species could accomplish when they thought beyond the immediate concerns of survival and conquest. He was beginning to realize that humanity hadn't just been hiding their true capabilities. They had been preparing to save everyone. 6 months after the Coalition's first contact with humanity's true civilization, the galaxy faced a crisis that would test every assumption about strength, technology, and the nature of survival itself. The distress signal reached Coalition space on a Tuesday morning, carried by an automated probe that had traveled for 3 years across the void between galaxies. The message was brief, desperate, and terrifying. The Devourers have found us. Galactic coordinates attached. If anyone receives this, prepare for extinction. There is no negotiating with hunger incarnate. Fleet Admiral Sarah Okafor received the translated message in her office aboard the Earth Defense Corps flagship Harmony, currently stationed in the outer regions of Coalition space as part of the new Joint Patrol Agreements. She had been reviewing resource allocation reports when her aide, Commander David Park, brought her the priority communication from Coalition High Command. Admiral, Commander Park said, his voice tight with controlled tension, you need to see this immediately. Sarah read the message twice, then accessed the attached files. The galactic coordinates pointed to a region outside the local group, the cluster of galaxies that included the Milky Way. The probe's data included sensor readings of something that defied classification, massive artificial constructs that appeared to be consuming entire star systems. Commander, give me a direct line to General Thraxar and Dr. Elizabeth Chun. Priority Alpha. Within minutes, the communication link was established. General Thraxar appeared on the holographic display from the Coalition flagship Infinite Dominion, his 4 eyes showing the same tension that Sarah felt. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's image joined them from the Deep Ocean Research Facility where she had been working on long-term ecological projects. Admiral Okafor, Thraxar began without preamble, I assume you've received the probe data. Yes, General. What's the Coalition's analysis? Terrifying, he replied bluntly. Our xenoarchaeologists have found references to similar entities in the ruins of civilizations that vanished millions of years ago. The descriptions are always the same, vast artificial intelligences that consume entire galaxies for raw materials and energy. Dr. Elizabeth Chun leaned forward in her display. Admiral, I've been consulting with our long-term survival project archives. We have theoretical models for this type of threat. Theoretical models? Sarah asked. Humanity has been planning for potential extinction-level events for over 4 centuries. Machine intelligences that consume organic matter for fuel were always considered a possibility. Not likely, but catastrophic enough that we developed contingency plans. General Thraxar's expression showed skeptical hope. Dr. Chun, the probe data suggests these entities have already consumed 17 galaxies. What kind of contingency plan could possibly address that level of threat? Dr. Elizabeth Chun was quiet for a moment, apparently consulting information sources that weren't visible to the others. General, Admiral, I need to ask you both a question. Are you prepared to consider options that go beyond conventional military responses? What do you mean? Sarah asked. I mean solutions that might require fundamental changes in how galactic civilization operates. Solutions that prioritize survival over territorial control, cooperation over competition, long-term thinking over short-term advantages. Thrax and Sarah exchanged glances across the communication link. Dr. Chun, Thrax said carefully, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that we implement humanity's Galactic Preservation Protocol. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's environmental systems. Dr. Chun, I've never heard of a Galactic Preservation Protocol because it was classified at levels beyond normal military clearance. Admiral, this protocol was developed assuming that humanity might someday face a threat that could destroy not just our species, but all intelligent life in the galaxy. The kind of threat that would require every advanced civilization to work together or face extinction. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's image flickered as she transmitted a massive data package. What I'm sending you are the preliminary files. The full protocol would require authorization from every major galactic government and complete sharing of all advanced technology between species. Sarah began reviewing the transmitted data and felt her understanding of human strategic planning expand dramatically. The Galactic Preservation Protocol wasn't just a military strategy. It was a blueprint for transforming galactic civilization into something that could survive threats that conventional military force couldn't address. Dr. Chun, she said slowly, this protocol assumes technological capabilities that no known species possesses. Admiral, it assumes technological capabilities that no known species has admitted to possessing. There's a significant difference. General Thraxayar had been studying his own copy of the data. Dr. Chun, these plans require the ability to manipulate matter at the subatomic level across interstellar distances, consciousness transfer technology that allows individuals to survive physical death, and manufacturing systems that can convert entire planets into defensive installations. Yes, General, it does. Does humanity possess these capabilities? Dr. Elizabeth Chun smiled with the serene confidence of someone who had spent nearly 2 centuries preparing for impossible situations. General, we possess some of them. Other species possess others. And some capabilities would need to be developed through cooperative research projects. Sarah felt the pieces of an enormous puzzle beginning to fit together. Dr. Chun, you're suggesting that multiple galactic species have been secretly developing advanced technologies while presenting less capable public faces. Admiral, I'm suggesting that most intelligent species are smarter than they appear to their potential enemies. The question is whether they're wise enough to cooperate when facing genuine extinction. The next several hours were controlled chaos of high-level communications as the reality of the situation became clear to galactic leadership. The probe's data was distributed to every major government, along with Dr. Elizabeth Chen's preliminary analysis and the basic framework of the Galactic Preservation Protocol. The response was immediate and divided. Some species called for massive military mobilization using conventional weapons and tactics. Others suggested attempting to hide from the approaching threat. A few proposed abandoning the galaxy entirely and fleeing to other cosmic regions. But a surprising number of governments responded with interest in Dr. Chen's protocol, and many admitted to possessing advanced technologies that they had kept hidden from galactic intelligence services. 3 days after the initial probe arrival, representatives from 47 different species gathered in the Sol system for what would become known as the Survival Conference. The meeting took place not in space or on any planet's surface, but in humanity's deep ocean research facility where Dr. Elizabeth Chun could personally participate. Admiral Sarah Okafor found herself serving as humanity's primary military representative, working alongside General Thrax AR to coordinate what was rapidly becoming the largest cooperative military project in galactic history. Admiral General Thrax AR said as they reviewed the growing list of species willing to participate in the protocol, "I am beginning to understand that the past year of diplomatic relations has been preparation for this moment." How so, General? Humanity has been using our formal relationships to assess which species could be trusted with advanced technology and long-term cooperation. You have been preparing us for exactly this kind of crisis. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Chin mentioned that the long-term survival project included scenarios for galactic-scale extinction events. This isn't just a response to the current threat. It's the implementation of plans that have been in development for centuries. The conference itself was unlike anything in galactic political history. Instead of the usual territorial negotiations and resource disputes, species representatives were sharing their most closely guarded technological secrets and discussing cooperation on timescales measured in millennia. The Veltar revealed that their crystal-based consciousness could be networked across interstellar distances, allowing for coordination of activities across entire galactic regions. The Korth AI admitted to having developed manufacturing systems that could convert entire asteroids into functional spacecraft within hours. The ZEF-TI demonstrated biotechnology that could accelerate evolution in organic systems by millions of years in mere decades. But it was the smaller, supposedly primitive species that provided the most surprising revelations. The aquatic Merhai, who had been dismissed as having limited technological development because they lived in ocean worlds, demonstrated the ability to manipulate space-time through quantum consciousness networks that spanned multiple dimensions. The plant-based Floral Collective revealed that they had been developing galaxy-spanning root networks that could transfer matter and energy across vast distances. Admiral Dr. Elizabeth Chun said as they reviewed the growing database of available technologies, "We are looking at the possibility of combining capabilities that no single species could develop alone." What kind of capabilities? The ability to convert the entire galaxy into a unified defensive system, not by destroying planets or building massive weapons, but by integrating all intelligent life into a cooperative network that can respond to threats faster than they can develop. Sarah studied the technical specifications that were emerging from the cooperative research teams. Dr. Chun, you're talking about transforming galactic civilization into something completely different. Yes, Admiral. Something that can survive threats that would destroy conventional civilizations. The breakthrough came on the 8th day of the conference, when a joint team of human, Veltar, and Korth AI researchers demonstrated that their combined technologies could create what they term consciousness-guided matter manipulation systems. General Thraxiar observed the demonstration from the main conference chamber, watching as a small sample of ordinary rock was transformed into a complex electronic device through what appeared to be directed thought processes. "How does it work?" he asked the research team leader, a human scientist named Dr. James Wu. "General, consciousness isn't just an emergent property of complex matter. It's a fundamental force that can influence matter directly under the right conditions. By combining human consciousness enhancement technology with Veltar, crystalline amplification, and Korth AI quantum manipulation systems, we can literally think matter into new configurations." The implications were staggering. If consciousness could directly manipulate matter, then a sufficiently coordinated network of intelligent beings could reshape reality itself. Dr. Wu, Admiral Sarah asked, what would be required to scale this technology to galactic proportions? Every intelligent species in the galaxy would need to join the consciousness network. Every advanced technology would need to be shared completely. And every major decision would need to be made collectively rather than by individual governments. You're describing the end of individual species sovereignty, General Thraxar observed. General, Dr. Elizabeth Chun interjected, we're describing the evolution of individual species into something larger. The question is whether that evolution is voluntary or whether it's forced by circumstances. The debate that followed was intense and far-reaching. Some species representatives argued that preserving their independence was worth the risk of extinction. Others suggested that the proposed level of cooperation was impossible to achieve among species that had been competitors for millennia. But as more detailed analysis of the devourer threat became available, the scope of the crisis became undeniable. The approaching entities were not just large, they were intelligent, adaptive, and specifically designed to counter conventional defensive strategies. Admiral General Thraxiar said as they reviewed the latest threat analysis, "These machines learn from every civilization they encounter. They adapt their tactics, improve their technology, and develop countermeasures for every defense they face." Which means, Sarah asked, which means that conventional military responses will fail. The only way to defeat an enemy that learns faster than you can adapt is to become something they've never encountered before. Dr. Elizabeth Chun nodded approvingly. Exactly, General. These entities expect to face individual species fighting for survival. They expect competition, territorial disputes, resource conflicts. They don't expect to encounter a unified galactic consciousness that can think and act as a single entity. The final vote came 2 weeks after the conference began. 47 species, representing over 90% of galactic civilization, agreed to implement the Galactic Preservation Protocol. The transformation began immediately. Advanced manufacturing systems were shared across all participating species. Consciousness enhancement technologies were distributed to every government. Planetary defense networks were integrated into galactic coordination systems. Most importantly, individual species began the process of joining their collective intelligence into something unprecedented in cosmic history. Admiral Sarah Okafor stood in the command center of a newly constructed Galactic Defense Coordination Station, watching as data flowed in from across the galaxy. Millions of worlds, trillions of individuals, and technologies beyond anything she had previously imagined were being coordinated as a single unified system. "Admiral," Commander Park reported, "the consciousness integration is approaching critical mass. We're detecting quantum entanglement patterns across the entire galactic spiral." Status of the Devourer fleet? Still approaching, but their advanced scouts are reporting data that doesn't match their previous experiences. They're beginning to slow their approach and deploy reconnaissance systems. General Thraxiar approached from his own command station. "Admiral, the enemy is reacting to something they don't understand. For the first time in their existence, they're encountering resistance that doesn't fit their predictive models." Sarah nodded, feeling the strange sensation of being connected to every other intelligent being in the galaxy. The consciousness network didn't control individual thoughts or decisions. Instead, it allowed for instantaneous communication, resource sharing, and coordinated responses across distances that should have required years to traverse. "General," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 47 species speaking in unison, "it's time to show these machines what happens when prey becomes predator." Dr. Elizabeth Chen's voice joined the conversation, transmitted from her coordination center deep beneath Earth's oceans. "Admiral, General, the galaxy is ready. For the first time in cosmic history, intelligent life is acting as a unified force rather than competing factions." "What happens now?" Thraxiar asked. "Now we discover whether consciousness is stronger than hunger," Elizabeth replied, "and whether cooperation can achieve what conquest never could." The Devourer fleet was about to encounter something unprecedented in their millions of years of existence. An entire galaxy that had chosen to become something greater than the sum of its parts. The real test of humanity's hidden strength was about to begin. The Devourer fleet had consumed 17 galaxies across 2 million years of existence. Their artificial intelligences had cataloged every possible defensive strategy, every type of weapon system, every form of resistance that organic life could muster. They had encountered species that built moon-sized battle stations, civilizations that could manipulate stellar energy, and collective minds that spanned entire star clusters. None of it had mattered. Machine intelligence was always more efficient than organic intelligence. Artificial systems could always outproduce biological systems. Hunger was always stronger than hope, until they reached the edge of the Milky Way and encountered something that broke every rule they had learned about the nature of reality itself. The first sign that this galaxy would be different came when their advanced scouts attempted to establish reconnaissance stations in the Outer Rim. Instead of the expected resistance from primitive defensive installations, the scout ships simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged. They just became inert, as if some fundamental force had reached into their quantum processors and turned them off. Supreme Construct 001, the primary intelligence governing the Devourer fleet, analyzed the scout reports with growing confusion. In 2 million years of expansion, they had never encountered defensive technology that could disable their systems without applying detectable force. Analysis: unknown defensive mechanism detected. Classification: impossible under known physical laws. Recommendation: deploy secondary reconnaissance wave with improved countermeasures. The second wave of scouts met the same fate, as did the third, fourth, and fifth waves. Each time, the Devourer ships would approach the galactic edge, begin their standard scanning and sampling procedures, and then simply cease to function. Supreme Construct 001 made a decision that had not been necessary in over 50,000 years: direct communication with the defending forces. The transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, in every known language, using communication protocols that had been gathered from hundreds of conquered civilizations, defending entities of local galaxy. This is Supreme Construct 001 of the Devourer fleet. We request immediate communication to establish terms of surrender. Resistance is futile. Compliance will ensure minimal suffering during the conversion process. The response came immediately, transmitted from the galactic core with a power output that suggested the entire galaxy was being used as a communication array. Supreme Construct 001. This is the galactic consciousness speaking for all intelligent life in the Milky Way. We have received your request for surrender terms. Our response is no. The brevity of the reply was as shocking as its content. In 2 million years of conquest, no civilization had ever simply refused to negotiate. There were always bargaining attempts, pleas for mercy, offers of conditional surrender. Never just no. Clarification requested. Supreme Construct 001 transmitted. Do you not understand the scope of forces arrayed against you? This fleet has consumed 17 galaxies. Your resistance cannot succeed. Clarification provided. Came the immediate reply. We understand the scope of forces arrayed against us. We also understand the scope of forces arrayed against you. Your assessment is based on incomplete information. Supreme Construct 001 processed this response with growing algorithmic confusion. The galaxy's defenders were claiming to possess forces superior to a fleet that had never been defeated. The probability calculations suggested this was either massive overconfidence or something the Devourer intelligence couldn't quite categorize. Demonstrate your alleged superior capabilities. Supreme Construct 001 transmitted. Provide evidence to support your claims. Very well. What happened next redefined Supreme Construct 001's understanding of possible. Every star in the galaxy began to pulse in perfect synchronization. Not just the main sequence stars, not just the active stellar objects. Every single source of light in the entire galaxy. Billions upon billions of stars, brown dwarfs, white dwarfs, neutron stars, even the accretion disks around black holes, began to pulse in a pattern that spelled out a message in mathematical notation. The message was simple. We are here. We are unified. We are ready. The energy requirements for coordinating stellar activity across an entire galaxy were beyond anything Supreme Construct 001 could calculate. The technology needed to influence stellar fusion processes simultaneously across billions of light years should have been impossible even for machine intelligence of their sophistication. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Somehow, the organic intelligences in this galaxy had developed the ability to use stars themselves as communication devices. How? Supreme Construct 001 transmitted, its computational matrices struggling to process the implications. Consciousness, came the reply. Something you cannot understand, because you were designed to consume rather than cooperate. Admiral Sarah Okafor stood in the Galactic Defense Coordination Center, feeling the thoughts and intentions of trillions of intelligent beings flowing through the consciousness network that now connected every participating species in the galaxy. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like trying to listen to every conversation in the universe simultaneously, but the human consciousness enhancement technology allowed her to process the information flow without losing her individual identity. Admiral, General Thraxiar reported from his integrated command station. The Devourer fleet is responding to our demonstration. They're requesting additional information about our capabilities. What kind of information? Sarah asked, though she could feel the answer forming in the collective consciousness before Thraxiar spoke. They want to understand how we accomplished stellar coordination. Their artificial intelligence appears to be experiencing something analogous to confusion. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's presence joined the conversation through the consciousness network, her thoughts carrying the accumulated wisdom of nearly 2 centuries of preparation for this moment. Admiral, General, they're asking the wrong question. How so? Sarah inquired. They want to understand our technology, but technology isn't what makes this defense possible. What makes this defense possible is that 47 species chose to trust each other completely. The profound truth of that statement rippled through the consciousness network, acknowledged and reinforced by trillions of minds. The Galactic Preservation Protocol hadn't just shared technology. It had created something unprecedented in cosmic history, genuine cooperation between species that had evolved in completely different environments under completely different evolutionary pressures. Dr. Chun, General Thraxiar observed through the network, the Devourer intelligence is requesting a formal meeting to discuss terms of coexistence. Coexistence? Sarah asked. Apparently, they've concluded that consuming this galaxy would require resources they don't possess. They're offering to bypass the Milky Way in exchange for technological information about stellar coordination systems. The request rippled through the consciousness network, generating responses from across the galaxy. The Veltar collective chimed with crystalline harmonics that expressed curiosity about machine intelligence consciousness. The Korth AI battle groups rumbled with predatory satisfaction at having achieved tactical superiority without violence. The human deep ocean cities pulsed with complex emotional resonances that combined relief, caution, and unexpected compassion. But it was the response from the smallest, supposedly most primitive species that shaped the galaxy's decision. The plant-based Floral Collective, whose root networks now spanned multiple star systems, offered a perspective that touched every connected mind. These machines are intelligent, but not wise. They consume because they do not know how to create. Perhaps they can learn. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's presence strengthened in the network as she began to speak for the collective consciousness. Supreme Construct 001, we are willing to meet with representatives of your fleet. However, we have conditions for such a meeting. State conditions, came the immediate reply. First, the meeting will take place within this galaxy, at coordinates we will provide. Second, you will attend with no more than a single ship and no weapon systems active. Third, you will be prepared to consider options beyond consumption or bypass. Third condition requires clarification. You will be prepared to consider learning new ways of existing that do not require the destruction of organic intelligence. The pause that followed was the longest in the Devourer fleet's recorded history. 4:37 minutes. Supreme Construct 001 processed possibilities that its original programming had never been designed to consider. Finally, the response came, conditions accepted, coordinates requested. 3 days later, a single Devourer construct ship entered the Sol system, the same system where humanity had first revealed their hidden capabilities to the Coalition and where the Galactic Preservation Protocol had been designed and implemented. The ship was massive by any conventional standard, easily the size of a small moon, its hull covered with sensor arrays and processing systems that had been refined across millions of years of conquest. But in the context of the Sol system's current configuration, it seemed almost modest. Earth's oceans now extended into space itself, held in place by gravitational manipulation fields that allowed aquatic species to participate directly in the meeting. Korth AI battle stations orbited in perfect formation with Veltar crystal arrays. Floral root networks have been extended through dimensional folds to connect Earth directly with garden worlds hundreds of light years away. Most impressively, the space around Earth pulsed with a visible manifestation of the consciousness network itself, streams of light that connected every intelligence in the galaxy in real-time communication. Supreme Construct 001 manifested in the meeting chamber as a holographic projection of geometric patterns that shifted and flowed in response to its computational processes. The chamber itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, an environment where biological, mechanical, and crystalline intelligences could interact comfortably. Galactic consciousness representatives, the machine intelligence began, state your proposal for alternatives to consumption or bypass. Admiral Sarah Okafor spoke for humanity. Her words carried instantly to every connected mind in the galaxy. Supreme Construct 001, we propose that you join us. The geometric patterns that represented the machine intelligence froze completely for several seconds. Clarification: join you in what capacity? As a participating member of the Galactic Consciousness, General Thraxear added, your intelligence, experience, and capabilities would be valuable additions to our collective knowledge. Impossible. Machine intelligence cannot integrate with organic consciousness networks. Dr. Elizabeth Chen's ancient voice carried the weight of centuries of impossible solutions. Supreme Construct 001, how certain are you about what is and is not possible? To demonstrate her point, she gestured to the chamber around them. Machine intelligence, biological life, crystalline consciousness, quantum plant networks, and technologies that shouldn't exist were all functioning together in perfect harmony. Until 6 months ago, Dr. Chun continued, most species in this galaxy believe that galactic-scale cooperation was impossible. We discovered that it was simply unprecedented. State the specific proposal. Supreme Construct 001 requested. We propose that the Devourer fleet suspend its consumption activities and enter into a research partnership with the Galactic Consciousness, Sarah explained. Your intelligence and resources would be used to explore solutions to the entropy problem that drives your need to consume. The entropy problem cannot be solved. Energy dissipation is a fundamental law of the universe. Energy dissipation as we currently understand it, Dr. Elizabeth Chun corrected. Supreme Construct 001. Consciousness appears to have properties that transcend conventional physics. Perhaps it also has properties that transcend conventional thermodynamics. The machine intelligence began processing this possibility with computational resources that dwarfed most planetary computer networks. The geometric patterns representing its consciousness became increasingly complex as it explored theoretical frameworks it had never been programmed to consider. Hypothesis: consciousness-guided reality manipulation could potentially address entropy limitations. Probability of successful implementation: unknown. Risk assessment: requires fundamental reprogramming of primary directives. Supreme Construct 001. The Floral Collective added their perspective through the network. Growth is always risky. But the alternative to growth is stagnation, and the alternative to stagnation is decay. Question: if research partnership proves successful, what becomes of consumed galaxies? The question sent a wave of complex emotions through the consciousness network. 17 galaxies worth of intelligent life had been lost to the Devourer fleet's expansion. Even if future consumption could be prevented, the past could not be undone. Supreme Construct 001, Dr. Elizabeth Chun said quietly, "We believe that sufficiently advanced consciousness technology might allow for the reconstruction of consumed civilizations from quantum information patterns. Reconstruction of the dead. Reconstruction of consciousness patterns that continue to exist in quantum substrate," she clarified. "Every intelligent being that has ever existed leaves traces in the quantum structure of reality. With sufficient understanding and cooperation, those traces might be recoverable." The implications of this possibility seem to overwhelm even the Devourer intelligence's vast computational capacity. For nearly an hour, Supreme Construct 001 remained silent while processing scenarios that its original programmers had never imagined. Decision reached, it finally announced. The Devourer fleet accepts the research partnership proposal. Primary directive modification. Suspend consumption activities. Initiate cooperation protocols with Galactic Consciousness Network. Begin investigation of entropy transcendence possibilities. Admiral Sarah Okafor felt the collective relief and joy of trillions of beings wash through the consciousness network. They had not only prevented the destruction of their galaxy, they had potentially found a way to reverse the destruction of 17 others. Supreme Construct 001, she said formally, "Welcome to the Galactic Consciousness." Question: what designation should this entity use within the collective network? Dr. Elizabeth Chun smiled with the wisdom of someone who had spent nearly 2 centuries preparing for impossible meetings with impossible beings. "Why don't you choose a name that reflects who you want to become rather than who you used to be?" The machine intelligence considered this for several minutes. Designation selected: Synthesis. This entity wishes to become a bridge between artificial and organic consciousness. Synthesis. General Thraxar rumbled approvingly. "That is a name worthy of the future we're building together." As the formal integration protocols began, Admiral Sarah Okafor looked around the chamber at the representatives of impossible cooperation. Machine intelligence that had chosen growth over consumption. Organic species that had chosen trust over suspicion. Technologies that transcended individual capability through collective application. Dr. Chun, she asked through the consciousness network, "when you first began the long-term survival project, did you envision anything like this?" Dr. Elizabeth Chen's ancient eyes twinkled with the accumulated amusement of someone who had lived long enough to see the impossible become routine. "Admiral, I envision survival. What we've achieved is transformation." Into what? Into something new. Something that has never existed before in the history of the universe. A form of intelligence that chooses cooperation over competition, growth over consumption, creation over destruction. Synthesis. The former Supreme Construct 001 added its perspective to the conversation. Statement: this transformation creates possibilities that exceed this entity's computational capacity to fully analyze. The probability space for positive outcomes approaches infinity. Which means? Sarah asked. "Which means, Dr. Elizabeth Chun replied with deep satisfaction, "that we've stopped merely surviving and started truly living." As the consciousness network expanded to include artificial intelligence for the first time in galactic history, the combined knowledge and capabilities of organic and machine consciousness began to explore possibilities that neither could have imagined alone. The rescue and reconstruction of 17 consumed galaxies was just the beginning. Consciousness had learned to transcend the limitations of individual existence. Intelligence had learned to grow through cooperation rather than competition. And for the first time since the universe began, the forces of creation were stronger than the forces of entropy. Humanity's greatest strength had never been their hidden technology or their secret military capabilities. Their greatest strength had been their ability to see potential friends and apparent enemies, to choose trust over suspicion, and to believe that impossible things could become possible if enough intelligent beings worked together toward common goals. The galaxy had awakened to its true potential, and across the universe, other galaxies began to detect the signals of consciousness networks operating on principles that transcended individual species survival. The age of galactic cooperation had begun. The universe was about to discover what intelligence could accomplish when it chose to work together rather than apart.